because there's so much that's going on within them as they becoming men. Their bodies in transition, their mindset is transitioning, they want to grasp to something, so they don't know how to identify within themselves first.
Now, I'm glad you said that, because I'm glad you said that they're coming into their identity. Because, and we were talking about this a little bit off the microphone, how do we help young men become upstanding young men who still, if they want to represent themselves as masculine, can do that? Like, how do we do this where we avoid toxic masculinity? And I would love it if you could even walk us through, if you feel confident in doing that, walk us through, our listeners, and through what toxic masculinity is and what effective masculinity is, and what's the difference, and how do we take or get our young men from point A to point B in a positive way? So they're channeling some of that trauma, they're channeling some of that anger in a more positive way and not getting disciplined for it, but being, self-aware and able to better regulate themselves if that be the case.
Toxic masculinity is taught by men who were not raised by their fathers, who don't have good character skills, who don't have good leadership skills, who think that a man is just someone who dictates and not be able to help. A man that is just strong and is not being able to be vulnerable. So in order for them to be effective, they have to understand that it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel your emotion. And leadership is not a dictatorship. Leadership is someone that helps others grow. But they also have to embrace that, okay, I'm different and this is who I am and this is okay with who I am. When I was a young man, I was different and I didn't want to follow the crowds. I didn't desire to follow the crowds. And I was teased and I was called names. And in today's society, young men, they're not able to accept the name calling because sometimes they are a little too sensitive because their toxic masculinity only teaches them how to fight out of the situation and not be able to navigate and lose their characteristics to gain the leadership skills, to be able to effectively communicate, to be able to regulate their mindset, be able to regulate their emotions, to be able to process. Now, a lot of times young men had that moment because they're not taught how to step back and be able to process and observe the situation. Because most times they just want to understand the intent that being toxic masculinity is being strong, and the only way I'm going to be able to overpower you is by hurting you.
So what are some programs, and maybe this gets into even some of the work you're doing, Robert, in schools, what are some of the programs that schools could initiate that helps teachers reach out to young men or boys, and at the same time helps these young boys to also self-advocate and articulate for their needs?
One program that I use is the leadership program. It's teaching young men not just leadership skills, but teaching them how to effectively communicate, because most young men understand that communication can be one way because they're not heard. So when you be able to validate that their communication is important, you're giving them the foundation and the keys to be able to move forward in life. Just like you see that the G.O.A.T says, every kid is born with a measure of greatness. That's what greatness over adversity and trauma is. You're born with greatness, but through life, you got to get over that adversity. You have to be able to understand, and that traumatic experience you're facing, that does not define who you are. It's just understanding that, okay, I went through this, but this is something that's been building steps in my life so I can have a platform to be able to help others.
And then in terms of that, you were saying helping young men to be leaders,
yes,
to advocate for themselves, especially when they feel that communication is only one way, where communication is directed at them as opposed to with them.
Right.
So what are some of the things you tell young men? How do you go about developing this sense of self-efficacy in young boys and adolescent men?
My first thing is relationship building. My next is being able to invest. And before I start the program, I usually have a football with me, and I have the football And I introduce myself, and I'll tell all the young men one thing about me that they don't know. And then I'll pass the ball around, have each young man do the same as well. And when the ball is passed around, it gives them that sense of purpose because they're carrying something. And then once they get to explain who they are, they're able to pass something off to the next person. And they don't understand that what they're carrying is much more greater than what they're dealing with within their environment and their mindsets. But their fight in the process of them overcoming their mindset and mental anguish is being able to understand that I have purpose and I have greatness.
Love that, love that. And what have been some of the talk up your work? Because you're a very unassuming man. So talk up your work. What have been some of the success stories? I mean, I don't need to know a student name, but
Yes.
walk us through some of the stories of young men that you've helped, where they were, where they not ended up, because
Yes.
it's still an ongoing journey,
Yes.
but how you saw them grow, because I'm sure that's what gets you up doing
Yes.
this every.
Yes, sir. Yes,
So
sir.
walk us through some of those stories, if you don't mind.
I'll take one story. 10 years ago, I met a young man. I was at a basketball game. He was playing basketball. And I just walked over to him and said, even though you may have missed that shot, there's still greatness in you. Even though you may not feel your best right now, you still have much more to give. And that young man went home and told his mom about what I said. And they looked up, because I actually had my program shirt on, and they looked up my program. And the mom signed the young man up for the program. So he joined the program, and his difficulty was he didn't have his dad. And when you in ministry and helping others, you tend to deal with the things you didn't deal with. You get the young men that didn't have no father, that didn't know how to communicate, that don't know how to understand how to be different and embrace their differences. And when he spoke with me one day about not having his father, he broke down. And I definitely can relate to that, because I know it was like that. Not have your father, but he's still present, but he's not actively present in what you desire. And we went to a basketball game, and we enjoyed ourselves and screamed and hollered and really had a good time. But every week, every Saturday, I would have where, like I do in the schools, I run my programming. And there's one particular Saturday when all the other young men left, he stood by and said, what you're telling me, I know to you may not seem like it matters or it's make a change, but it's make a change. Right now, I actually applied for the high school I want to go to, and I'm starting to working towards going to the military. And now he's in the military. He's been in the military for the past 4 years, and he's been doing a great job. He's been focused, and I like, there's stories like that. I go on and on. I just did one recently, virtually, where a young man did not take accountability. He blamed his mom and his siblings for everything that went on because he didn't accept the responsibilities of his decisions, which most young men don't, because they're not taught accountability. So by the second week of the program, he understood that in order for him to be able to change his life, he had to accept accountability. But the key factor that we don't do as human sometimes is forgive. We have to forgive not just others, but ourselves. And he was able to forgive himself and ask his parents, how could he become a better son? And ask his siblings, how can he become a better brother? And the young man now is excelling. He's in 9th grade. He's excelling in school. He's an AB student. He has ones in his behavior. He's doing great.
Love it, love it, love it. Now, you're talking a lot about, and I'm glad you're mentioning this too, Robert. Yes, in your programming, you've been working mostly with young men, in groups of young men, talking about their issues, sharing, seeing that they're not alone, providing that mentorship to them.
Yes.
But you've also said something else that I want to pick up on that I thought was interesting. It's how they are also relating to their mothers, especially if they don't have a two-parent family, how they're relating to their siblings. So this makes me wonder, how do you walk young men through communicating with young women or girls?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does that look like in your program, where they're able to represent themselves, but allowing, or not even that it's their choice, but allowing young girls and adolescent women to represent themselves as well? if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm making sense.
That makes sense. So what I do is I have them understand that you have a mother, you have a sister, you have a female cousin, a female aunt, and how would you want people to talk to them? How would you want people to treat them? Would you want them to treat them in the manner that you're treating other young ladies? Would you want them to use curse words and profanity towards other young women? Would you want that for someone to speak to your mom like that? Would you want someone to speak to your sister like that? And their reaction is the protective reaction, because they're like, okay, I don't want nobody to hurt someone, my family. But they have to understand that you're hurting someone else's family member by treating them in a derogatory manner. So you have to understand what I've learned to help young men understand is, what do you love about yourself? How can you conduct yourself? And I love in our families is not just protecting them, but it's also hearing them and understanding them. How can we understand young women? How can we respect young women? Even if they put themselves in a predicament where you may seem like they are respectable, but they are still someone's daughter. They are still human, and you still have to respect them as well.
How do you help them do this? Particularly in an environment we find ourselves in now with toxic social media, where you have a lot of media personalities who are extreme.
Yes.
And trying to get boys and young men thinking with hate as opposed to love. So I don't know, what does your program do to help young men or boys and young men to navigate all those online threats as well?
What I help them understand that social media is just a flash of someone's life. So your mindset is either going to be drawn to the toxic masculinity, as we spoke of, or the effective masculinity. How can I become better? How can I overcome this? How is this serving me? Most young men don't understand that what they see, they grasp mentally. They just say they think it's something, I seen it, that's not what I would do. But in some form, we emulate something that we see or that we feed ourselves with every day.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the ways, or maybe you could even add to this, I think one of the ways hate mongers get impressionable young men, unfortunately, on their side is they don't help, obviously, young men take accountability for their own actions yet, and they focus on the trauma and the vulnerabilities and the victimhood.
Right.
So how do you, because the young men you're working with are dealing with a lot of real trauma.
Yes.
How do you help them deal with that trauma in a way that doesn't victimize them or make them think of themselves? Yes, they have been victims, but how do you help them move beyond that, where you help them to realize it's not their fault, but they can't keep looping back on their victimhood, that they are accountable for their actions moving forward, and if they go in a right path, it doesn't mean what has happened to them will automatically continue to happen to them. Because I think on social media, hate mongers exploit those vulnerabilities. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, most young men, they look up to who they emulate. So if they're looking up to the rappers, that's what they're emulating. And then with growing up in an environment where the projects where I lived at, you won't have too many choices. You don't have too many opportunities to accept something positive, because you're living in a negative environment literally every day. So on one corner, you may have somebody selling drugs. On the other end of the block, you might just have people standing out on the corner. Maybe in the playground, they're playing basketball, but then the fight breaks out. So your environment sometimes is accepted through our mindset because we're conditioned through it. Just like they're conditioned to emulate what they're seeing through the people that's on social media that have that negative mindset, because most times young men gravitate towards negativity, because when something positive is talked about, it's less effective because that may not be their interest. That may not be the path that they want to take at the present time, or just the positive message they want to hear. But getting young men to understand that, yes, you live where you at, or yes, the school you go to may not be the best, but you can change that because you are the change. And the change starts with you, even when your home environment is not the best. Changing your mindset is the key for helping young men to understand and develop that they have purpose, because our mindset are so set on the certain things that we like and we feel and gravitate towards, that when it's something that's a strong message that's helping us move forward, we're not ready to move forward. Because what does trauma do? It brings baggage. There are things that we're carrying. And most times when we're carrying something, just like when school, young men go to the next class, what they do? They put the bag on. They zip the bag back up. They bag everything back in, put it back on, and go to their next class. And that's just how it is in their environment. They see the things in their environment. They take their book bag. They take what they want to take from the environment, put it in their bag, and they're ready to carry it. And this is who they portray themselves to be and who they think they have to be because of just what they want to carry in life. But the understanding of what they have to put down is much more stronger effort, because most young men fear the hard work. That's the steps and ladder towards success.
I'm glad that you mentioned this steps concept and hard work, because let's face it, all kids live in the present moment. Very few of them, when we tell them, well, it doesn't always have to be like this. It depends on your actions. I mean, we might as well be, talking to a wall in some cases, and that's not a discredit on our young people.
Right.
It's just neurologically, they're not necessarily ready to conceptualize that.
Right.
They don't understand the trajectory of life. So, given what you're saying about steps and helping them to not always pack things up in an environment, particularly if it's an environment of a lot of struggle, how do you get them, the young men that you work with, the boys you work with, how do you get them to see progress in the moment in your leadership work with them? Because your leadership programs are with the kids, right? Not the adults.
No, with the young men.
Or both.
Yeah, it's with the young men.
Right. So then how do you help them to see those short-term wins or those short-term gains?
A vision board, that's my first start with the young men. What do you vision your life to be? Giving them a sense of purpose, because without the lack of knowledge, we perish. So when we don't understand who we are moving forward in life and what we want, most young men just go haywire and just go along life until something that they finally want to do comes along. But if you give them a vision for themselves and help them be able to start building the steps towards their foundation, then you'll be able to plant little seeds. My vision board, I get magazines where it have nothing to do with sports. It's people in suits, people working in construction. Because young men, they desire to be something, but they don't have what it takes to get there, because no one invested in their dreams. No one invested in being able to sit down and gain understanding of what they actually want to do and not what the parent desired for them. Most parents dictate their child's life, because sometimes, let's be realistic, parents live through their kids, especially when they haven't succeeded within life.
And now, even speaking about parents, in your work, how does that intersect with parents?
Well, that intersects with gaining understanding with the parent. The key with the student and the parent is the background difference. And most parents grew up in a time where they was not able to be hugged. They did not have their parent tell them they loved them. So now they're navigating through life just the way they receive love, just the way they receive communication. So they think that's the norm because that's what they went through. But their son is not dealing with the trauma and navigating through their trauma and can be able to be loved the way they was loved. When their son doesn't get the chance to get hugged or has that quick second to look in the room and, hey, how's everything going? When they're uninterrupted and being able to express how they feel. Because we all are shaped and designed, and the human form is love. And when we're not loved, we don't have no value for life. We don't feel like we matter. And this is why most young men are falling by the wayside because they not get loved at home. Their parents working 1, 2, maybe 3 jobs just to provide. And some young men have both parents, and the father is more active in the work just to be able to provide.
So then, I hear what you're saying about talking with your kids when you can and letting them know that you love them. What about that social media aspect or helping parents navigate outside influences on their children? Because I hear what you're saying, that, let the kids know you love them. But unlike maybe even when you were younger or I was younger, there wasn't all this, again, social media coming in at us necessarily. And so you might think, yes, you're loved, but there's so much out there that's coming into our young people's lives that I know I didn't have to deal with as a child. So what advice do you give to parents to counter what messages kids might, and this is even for teachers, what messages kids might be getting from society? I know that's a hard question.
No, that's not a hard question. My counter is the old-fashioned dinner table. When we at the dinner table, all devices and everything is away. So when I grew up, we didn't like you, John. I didn't have cell phone, so being able to spend family time was the time when we ate together. Because the house I grew up in, my family didn't know how to be able to converse and communicate and be able to come together at good times. We would argue.